Hey, before we get started, just a quick word about that title.
Have any of you, say, 20 years old or more, actually gone back and watched Reality Bites lately? It's awful. It doesn't hold up one fucking bit. What the fuck was wrong with us? That was supposed to be like the defining romantic comedy of my generation, and it's just terrible. How did we ever convince ourselves it was this insightful, important examination of relationships when it's really just this big pile of empty, dated, trendy bullshit? It plays out like a fucking Friends episode. Jeez, you know what else doesn't work anymore? Chasing Amy. Yeah, same basic problem, really. You know, I wish that the actual, mature, insightful Kevin Smith who did Clerks 2 and Zack and Miri could go back and do that instead of the make-believe, mature, insightful Kevin Smith who had to win back critics after Mallrats. Anyway.
As video games have evolved as both a medium and, dare I say, an art form, the tip of the spear for each new technical innovation has up until very recently been the graphics. And while gameplay snobs can cluck their tongues about that all they want, it's a perfectly reasonable occurrence. Before you play it, you have to see it. For a while, it was all about detail. These were the days when we still talked in terms of bits, when all video displays and thus all in-game art was still chiefly comprised of 2D single-color pixels, and the smaller the pixel, the sharper the detail an image could be. NES had more detail than Atari, Genesis had more detail than NES, SNES had a larger color palette, etc. You could see it, you could identify it. This changed when bits rolled over into the 32s and 64s, i.e. the point at which the individual pixel details were nearly impossible to differentiate by the mere human eye. At that point, a new standard emerged by which developers would tout their skills: realism. And this was the new contest: who could make their graphics most closely resemble the real world. It's not a bad yardstick in theory. It gave things a ceiling and everyone a definitive goal to aim for. And that's the problem. It should never have been a goal. Being able to mimic reality is an artistic skill, but it's not the only artistic skill. Realism is just a style. Used to be, gaming was full of styles. Sure, there were games that angled for realism, but there was also caricature, surrealism, anime, hell, even outright abstraction. But once realism became the new fad, everyone started running in that direction, whether it was really suited for the franchise or not. And it got supercharged in the PlayStation era, as part of the larger effort to expand the audience for gaming beyond its original nerdcore niche. Striving for realism helped attract potential customers, who previously might have avoided gaming back when its dominant aesthetic had a more fanciful tinge. And look, that's all well and good, and I recognize that this is one of those situations where I'm in the minority, but I just don't dig realism all that much, in my video games or in pretty much anything else. I don't like the real world. I have to live there, and it sucks. It's drab, it's dingy, quality control is a fucking joke, A-cups are far too prevalent, nobody can fly, and all the dinosaurs are dead. I play video games to get away from this shithole. But whatever, that's a personal thing, and like it or not, realism is here to stay for the foreseeable future, or at least as long as how good will this look on your plasma is still considered a reliable selling point for a $400 Metal Gear delivery system. My more relevant problem with realism is that lately I've found it interfering with my ability to enjoy the actual games, chiefly by creating annoyances that previously didn't exist. Simply put, realism makes games look like the real world, but being games, they still fundamentally aren't the real world. They're games, and they tend to run on an internal logic and physics that don't and were never meant to mesh with reality. This creates a disconnect that, ironically, tends to pull me out of the game instead of drawing me further in. This design versus perception phenomenon I'm talking about has a name, or rather, a similar phenomenon in a similar field has a name: the uncanny valley. The term was first coined in 1970 by a Japanese roboticist named Masahiro Mori, and referred to a hypothesis he'd formed in regard to a study of people's reactions to robots and/or animatronic figures designed to replicate the appearance and behavior of living things, usually humans. The short version goes something like this: when a robot looks wholly mechanical without any artificially suggested personality, we generally react to it neutrally. When it's made to look similar to a person but not necessarily lifelike, we react positively. If you jump ahead to the point at which the robot can be made to look realistically human, or even like a kind of perfected human, we react even more positively. But in the middle, at the point where a robot looks just close enough to real that you can notice the unreal parts that much more, our reaction typically becomes disgust or even fear. This low point he termed the uncanny valley, and it handily describes my frequent frustration with overly realistic graphics. The more real it looks, the more noticeable and irritating the unreal stuff becomes. Let me demonstrate. Here we have a setting and scenario that you can find in about 20 or 30 games released this week alone, and Probably they were all first-person shooters. Here I am in a room. I need to get through that door, but it's locked and I need the red key. Now, that basic instruction is about as old as gaming itself. No biggie there. Let's go find the red key. And, hey, wait, why exactly do I need the red key? Why can't I just kick down the door? I've killed like 40 guys in this level already, but I'm not willing to commit violence on a door? Huh. Well, maybe it's some kind of specially reinforced material that I just can't break. Oh no, wait, it's not. Someone in the design department thoughtfully laid a wooden texture pattern on it, so it's a wooden door. I should just be able to break the fucking thing. And hey, wait, forget breaking it, I can destroy it. I mean, somehow I'm carrying on my person right now a knife, a .45, an AK-47, an Uzi, an M16, a bazooka, and a flamethrower. Any one of those could put a hole in a wooden door, right? Wrong. For some reason, the ammunition I've been using to blow the limbs off solid steel cyborgs is suddenly ineffective against a door. Hey, maybe the flamethrower can burn it. I burned away some wooden beams to get in here, so... Oh, wait. Those beams were highlighted, so I'd know they would burn. The door isn't, so no go. So I can't shoot the door, I can't even shoot the lock. Hey! Wait, the lock! They've thoughtfully art-designed screws onto it. Screws! That means I can just take it apart with a screwdriver, or my knife, or dozens of other bits of metal I've got on me or around the room, and... No, I can't do that. In fact, there's about 100 different ways I could MacGyver my way out of this damn room if it were real, instead of just looking real. But then it can't be real because it's a game, and the real world, after all, doesn't have levels, continues, fetch quests, or whatever. So, yeah, that's where my mind wanders when I'm stuck in the uncanny valley of overly realistic game design. Now, yes, the whole why do I need to go hunt down that one key thing doesn't make any more sense in an Unreal game than it does in a realistic one. It's just less noticeable to me. There's not a lot of room to wonder about relative malleability of doors when said door now appears comprised of a material that can't be readily identified, and it's hard to hold the rest of the room to the standards of the physical world when you're clearly not there. See, the same niggling frustration that grips me when a wooden door refuses to act like it's made of wood never occurs to me when, just for example, the same guy who will die almost instantaneously if he's touched anywhere but the soles of his boots by a turtle can smash through solid brick with his fists. Why? Because this obviously isn't the real world. It's a cartoon Mushroom Kingdom. Who's to say what their bricks are made of, what turtles can do, or what the laws of physics are? For that matter, why wonder how it is that Mega Man, who's presumably made of metal, can withstand multiple direct hits from bullets and missiles, but he's fatally vulnerable to the slightest touch from what appears to be an artificial sea urchin? Paradoxically, the only instance where realism interests me is when it's used to increase the immersion in unreality by blurring the line between fantasy and the physical world. Like how BioShock's insane attention to detail almost makes an objectivist steampunk utopia at the bottom of the ocean look physically plausible, or how the Metal Gear games strive for a look best described as an R-rated metaphysical take on G.I. Joe.
Incidentally, that movie had better not suck like Transformers did, goddammit. Once upon a time, you made fucking awesome movies, Steven Summers. Don't let me down on this.
So, where am I going with this, other than complaining about a design trend I just don't personally enjoy? Well, fuck if I know, honestly. If you want, I guess you could take it as my plea to the gaming world to stop being so slavishly devoted to capturing reality when it could be doing so much more. Of the myriad reasons to be glad for the rise of play control emphasizing innovations like Guitar Hero, Rock Band, the Wii, Microsoft's brand new natal system, and even the essentially stillborn PlayStation Eye, is that they've taken a machete to the my graphics can outreal your graphics fight and sent developers scrambling for new footing. A little chaos is probably for the best, especially if it makes designers take stock and wonder how we went from an era where games that could barely render a semi-human shape sent the player off to the furthest reaches of fantasy, to a modern era where games can render anything and send you anywhere, but only seem interested in continually revisiting the second act of Black Hawk Down. So, now, before I go, it appears some apologies are in order. Firstly, there's a matter of overlooked debt. Episode 23, on the subject of Resident Evil 5 and Race post-release, was framed as a sequel to Episode 8, on the same subject pre-release. Said Episode 8 made frequent reference to game journalist Nguy Kroll, who was among the earliest critics of the game's off-putting racial subtext. And while I did defend his right to express himself in that episode, I also opined that I disagreed with him, to the extent that he might be overreacting as I saw it. Now, in the wake of the game actually coming out, I can say with some certainty that he was much closer to home about how the game was shaping up than I was. Honor dictates that I should acknowledge this. I neglected to do that in number 23, and now I have to do it here. No ifs, ands, or buts about that.
I also finally want to thank all the folks who wrote in excitedly the moment it was announced that Tatsunoko vs. Capcom was actually coming to America. In fact, let's close on another look at that. So cool.